debate surrounding critical race theory?
Well, thank you all for having me. To the organizers, it's been great working with you all. I would say that the most important thing to know is the actual definition. I mean, that becomes centrally important. And I mean, Hannibal, you laid it out, and I'll just say it in an even simpler way that my colleague at Brookings, Alexandra Gibbons, and I did when we wrote about CRT last summer. CRT does not attribute racism to white people as individuals or even to entire groups of people. Simply put, critical race theory states that U.S. social institutions, and when we say social institutions as a sociologist, what we mean are the governing structures that normalize things around us: the criminal justice system, education, obviously, the labor market, the housing market, the healthcare system, that these social institutions are laced with racism embedded in laws, regulations, rules, and procedures that lead to differential outcomes by race. As sociologists have long talked about, we don't necessarily need individual racists for racist things to continue. Now, of course, we know that there are racist people, but at the same time, we have to recognize that we have never in the United States done a full autocorrection for the way that racism is intertwined with our society.
Thank you. Next question from Ms. Robinson Woods. Why is there fear associated with what is one short fiction published in 2019 about the lasting legacy and implications of slavery in the United States from the writers of the New York Times and New York Times Magazine? Do you think that the 1619 Project was part of the impetus for this movement against critical race theory?
Well, look, I think the 1619 Project was definitely used as a flame to the fire. But it's important to note what the fire actually was. The fire came from a popular far right social media pundit who decided to use critical race theory as a justification for white replacement theory. White replacement theory is another term that you all have been hearing about that has popped up more. It is this narrative and this logic that supposedly in the year 2050 that white people are going to be the numerical minority. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case, and I'll tell you why. It's a couple of important reasons for that, and then I'll get back to 1619. But it's important for people to realize what's happening with white replacement theory because we're starting to hear that more. That is the new poisonous candy that is in the wrapper. You know, that's what far right extremists do is they put new things in a neat wrapper and then have us opening it up. So it's two reasons why that's probably not going to happen. First, that's assuming that our immigration laws stay the same as they are today. And we know that over the past 4 years, our immigration policies have changed dramatically. Even if you can look at a state like Oklahoma that oftentimes relies on migrant and immigrant workers to do various things, and we see a lack there. The second thing is that it also pits white people against non-white people, which is completely a false dichotomy. Not only does the society not operate that way, but it also suggests that non-white people have the same interests and the same goals, and they don't. Even within the same groups, people don't. Black people are heterogeneous. Asian people have heterogeneous views. Latinos and Native Americans as well. So we oversimplify things. The 1619 Project, and I want to be clear about this, that of course a collection of these essays and other sort of scholarly works. I know a majority of the scholars who wrote essays in the 1619 Project. These are some of the foremost scholars that we have, not only in the United States, but around the world, who are at some of the best institutions in the world. Ivy League institutions, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and the list goes on and on. What I think is happening with the 1619 Project is that it is a very important piece of work. It is also digestible. Therefore, it becomes something that people can readily use, whether that be in workplaces or churches or in schools. Therefore, it must be attacked. Because one thing I know about being an academic and then writing publicly, the stuff we write academically, when I write a 9,000 word article, a lot of people can't understand that stuff, don't really want to. They're trying to figure it out. But you write an essay like the 1619 Project and the way that those scholars can write, and now all of a sudden people are understanding what's going on. So when we think about the 1619 Project, did it inflame things? No, it simply highlighted things. You know, it simply showed what was actually happening, the way that racism continues to manifest. And one question I always ask people, not only about the 1619 Project, but also about critical race theory. I say, have you read it? And normally 9 times out of 10 people say no. And so my response as a scholar, I'm like, it's hard for me to have a conversation with you because see, we're working with different pieces of information. You're working with pieces of information people have given you. I'm working with the actual piece of information. And if you're willing to do that, then we can start to have a conversation about it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Ms. Robinson Woods, I want a different spin on really the same question. So in law school, we have a concept called the Hecklers veto. And it's the idea that because of someone else's fragility, you shouldn't do X, Y, or Z. What are your thoughts on this notion that students shouldn't be made to feel uncomfortable or guilty about our history?
Well, look, I think the way that Ms. Robinson Woods just laid it out is right on target. I mean, look, students are made to be uncomfortable all the time. And look, if your kids play sports, and I know in Oklahoma, Oklahomans love sports. Your kids are made to be uncomfortable every single day. They're out there doing things that they can't do. It's only oftentimes when we deal with race and racism that people are uncomfortable. And partly, we have to be honest, that's because young children, people, primarily young white children, might look up and start asking their parents that they participate in the 1960s and some of the bad stuff that happened to some of their black friends. And a lot of people aren't willing to have those particular conversations, right? So the uncomfortableness isn't always about children. It's frequently about their parents. And as we heard, it's a lot of it has been contributed to people engaging in virtual learning, hearing words that they don't necessarily want to hear. We have to recognize that there are a lot of people, because of their status in society, their privilege, if you will, they have the ability to not even entertain or engage these conversations, while